Your MMA Mount Rushmore. You get to pick who's on it. It could be Royce Gracie, could be GSP, could be Demetrius Johnson. It could be all of these names. But when you consider it at the end of the day, we might have one of MMA's Mount Rushmores fighting. It could be the GOAT. It is Jon Bones Jones. The return, 3 years in the making. Last time he competed UFC 247 against Dominic Reyes, and he took 3 years to make the move up to heavyweight with Francis Ngannou gone and the title banished. He's going to be taking on Francis' former teammate, the former interim champ at heavyweight, Bon Gamin, Ciryl Gane, representing France. Matt, this is an all-time fight at heavyweight. This is a poster fight, and I think the UFC did a pretty good job with the poster. This is like Brock Lesnar, Alistair Overeem levels of poster. I love the fight. I can't wait to see it for Jon Jones because in the last 3 years, just with Fight Night picks alone, we've done videos. Could he become the heavyweight champ? What's he going to look like at 250? Because there were points where Jon Jones was posting pictures and he was bulked up. Now he looks better, but he was in the bulking season. He was sitting on the couch eating McDoubles and just loading the BJs, the Ben and Jerry's. But when you look at it for Jon Jones and you consider everything throughout his career, 11 title defenses, 2 reigns as the undisputed champ, 1 as the interim champ before he was able to unify the belts. So it's just wild to go through it and look at all of the totality of his career. He had the legal issues, the hit and run. He had USADA issues. He had UFC 200 that fell out. And then all of a sudden Anderson Silva's fighting Daniel Cormier. There's so many parts and parcels to unpack with Jon Jones' game. Everybody's going to tell you, well, guys, he was a JUCO champ in wrestling back at Iowa Central Community College. He was a national champ and an All-American there. Yes, we've seen some of the wrestling in some of these fights, and we'll highlight it for sure. The other part about this fight week, Matt, Ciryl Gane. I mean, the guy was undefeated. He won the belt. It was against Derek Lewis. He gets the win out there, fights Francis Ngannou, who had knee sleeves and put the wrestling shoes on. And then Gane had to transition to, okay, I'm back in a main event. I got to get a win. Tai Tuivasa hit him with a hard shot, dropped him. Gane just gets back up, rallies around, and then Gane's able to go out there with his kicks, and especially his body kicks, and finish, and then really finish Tai Tuivasa in that fight. But Matt, the big story of this week, the headline, and I'm going to read it off. It was in an interview that came out 11 days ago. We're taping this on the Monday night of Fight Week with Lassueur. He said, "J'adore le grappling et malheureusement je suis fainéant. La vérité c'est que je prépare,
The quote was in English, too.
No, it wasn't. Et je prépare et je m'entraîne quand il y a un combat annoncé." It was in French because it was a French interview. But out of it, Ciryl Gane, in other words, said, I train when I have a fight and the fight is signed and it's announced, and apart from that, I don't. But if you really listen to the whole 40-minute interview, he says, I used to do that, but now I'm into it. And his coach, Fernando Lopez, came out and said the same thing. Like, he used to do that. He's fully entrenched in the training for this one, getting ready for the grappling, getting ready for everything. But now, all of a sudden, there's noise and there's question marks around Gane's training. And likewise, Jon Jones, 3 years away, you expect him to fit into heavyweight well and to be training all of these skills that we've seen, being the GOAT of MMA.
But the last 2 times we saw the GOAT, he didn't look like the GOAT whatsoever and couldn't get the thing that he is best known for. Like you say, wrestling in some of his fights, Jon Jones at wrestling is like his big X factor. Like, his grappling is what he's best at. And it's not a controversial
look at him against
all.
Gustafsson.
Well, just most of his fights, he gets on top of people, beats their head in, and then submits them after he beats them up with ground and pound. Like, Jon Jones has some of the best ground and pound in MMA history. He has elbows, he has hooks, he throws a combination on the ground. Like, my favorite Cain Velasquez highlight is when he knocked out Nogueira, because after he hurts him on the feet, he throws in combination to knock him out on the ground. Jon Jones does the exact same thing. Now, the thing about Jones is, I was joking with some of my friends about this the other day, they were asking me about this fight. Jon Jones, when he retires, isn't going to be one of these fighters who goes on to do, like, celebrity boxing type matches, because if there's any knock about Jon Jones, he doesn't have great pure boxing. He's a great MMA striker, don't get me wrong, but he really does need to implement his own kicks into his game for him to really open up his hands, because a lot of his boxing, he lunges into shots, his head's not necessarily in the right spot. Now, if he's able to get to elbow range, of course we all know how talented Jon Jones is with the elbows, the spins on the inside too. The 2 things that I keep on worrying about though, and this kind of is a bit of a negative for both guys, I'll say, is that Jon Jones, for as good of a grappler as he is, couldn't take down Thiago Santos on 2 bad knees in their fight, and he also didn't have a lot of success with his grappling against Dominic Reyes.
And in the first 30 seconds of the fight, he runs across in the first round, goes for a takedown, Reyes' hip to it, and pops him back up.
So I do worry about those things. But in the same vein, Ciryl Gane got taken down and convincingly out-grappled by a guy who had not shown any levels of MMA wrestling up until that point, who didn't have any knee in the fight either.
Think about that for a second. Francis Ngannou never showed an offensive prowess for wrestling. Jordan Levitt never showed an offensive prowess for striking until he takes on Victor Martinez and knees him into oblivion. Wild stuff can happen in MMA sometimes.
I know, but for Ciryl Gane, grappling was a part of his game that he was good at and he can get submission wins. I didn't think in a million years he would be able to get out-grappled off of his back by a guy like Francis, and that's why I worry about someone with Ciryl Gane. I think offensively his grappling is good in that top position, but a lot of heavyweights fall into this category. Unless you're Fabricio Verdum, it's really hard to sweep another guy who weighs 220 plus pounds off of on top of you and then getting on top of them. Jon Jones is so much better at grappling than Francis Ngannou is. That, if it is as big of a weakness in his game as it was in the Francis fight, Jon Jones is probably going to take down Ciryl Gane in 30 seconds and ground and pound him in the first round. That's how big of an advantage I think Jon has in the grappling in this matchup. Now, Gane does have that one thing we talk about quite a bit. If you can't defend the takedown, what do? Use your feet to get away from it. And of course, Ciryl Gane has some of the best footwork we've really ever seen in the heavyweight division. That was a big sales point before the Francis fight. It was, hey, this guy can get on the inside of the pocket and on the outside of the pocket without eating those big shots. But again, he did eat one of those big shots his last time out against Tai Tuivasa. For Ciryl Gane, I can admit this. I was open about this on the channel. I never really bought into the hype until the Alexander Volkov fight because he was tested in that matchup and I thought he looked good after that. But it feels like once I finally bought in with him, we have started to see some cracks in the armor with the wrestling with Francis and the striking with time.
There's questions for both guys. With Jon Jones, he gets the belt back. He beats Alexander Gustafsson in the second fight. Now, first fight, UFC 165 in Toronto, it's a UFC Hall of Fame fight. So Jon Jones is already in the Hall of Fame, already 11 title defenses. He'll be there at the end. Regardless of all the noise and all the bad things that have happened in his personal life and otherwise, Jon Jones is a Hall of Famer. Now, you look at the second title reign, the defenses. Anthony Smith,
he beat the brakes off him.
He beat the brakes off of him, but he lost 2 points due to one illegal knee where Anthony Smith could have said, hey, that's enough, no mas, and he gets the title. He then goes out there and beats Thiago Santos. That one's a split decision, but more convincing than Jones' unanimous decision win at UFC 247 against Dominic Reyes. And at that time, 14-7 split in favor of Reyes from MMA Media, scoring that fight for Reyes over Jones. I scored round 2, round 4, round 5 for Jones. I thought Jones landed the harder, better shots in round 2. Reyes landed better volume. But the people that like Reyes or had Reyes to win said 1, 2, and 3. Reyes outlanded him, and then he started to tail off in the championship fights. But a very close fight, a very good fight. I can't sit here and confidently say I know what Jon Jones is going to look like after 3 years, and having gained weight moving from 204, his last official weigh-in, call it 205, up to heavyweight. I don't know what he's going to weigh. Assume around 250, 240
What if he
to
just
250.
turns into his brother Chandler?
Man, that guy was a beast.
No, but that's what I mean.
But if he turns into Arthur, he's got a problem.
But if he just becomes Chandler Jones, the heavyweight division, and just mops everybody, that'd be wild.
But if he turns into Arthur, he might mop the mat.
Well, just, focus on the great brother.
But when you look at this for Jon Jones, I know the skills. I know how good the striking is, the kicks. I know how tough and durable Jon Jones is
and
for
I'm
busting his toe against Chael Sonnen that's still winning.
The thing that people like to bring up about all-time greats who don't face a lot of adversity is, how are they going to look when they do get hit? To Jon Jones's credit, when the going gets tough, he can get really tough. And I know you don't automatically think of that because it is difficult to have an honest opinion about Jon Jones because your opinion does get clouded by all the kind of noise outside of the cage. But if you just look at what happens inside the cage, he has every single skill you could ever ask from an MMA fighter. He has great cardio, great takedown defense, the ability to go out there and take down Olympians in the case of Daniel Cormier. And again, when he does get tagged in fights, it's not like he has some brittle chin and poor cardio. When the going gets tough, like I said, look at the Gustafsson fight. Gustafsson starts out very strong, but Jones slowly breaks him down over and over and over. So this is as fun of a fight as there is out there. I will say this, though, and I hate that I have to tarnish it. I just wish it was Francis.
Yeah, and I mean, for Ciryl Gane, I've been on the bandwagon since he came into the UFC because he was champ with TKO in one of the biggest cards you're going to find outside of the UFC. TKO 48. Nate Maness was on that card. There were so many big names that ended up being in the UFC that were on that one. Gane took on Adam Dijkse. finished him and won the heavyweight title, or he was the heavyweight champ, and then he finished Dijkse, who was the challenger. Dijkse then went on a skid, became a boxer, and his career was never the same. Gane comes into the UFC and decimates the competition, and yeah, you might think, okay, well, he beat an old Junior Dos Santos, but that's one of those win that gets you over the hump. The fight against Jairzinho.
That was awful.
Kind of boring because Gane's dominating the position. He's landing shots from distance.
Is it dominating if you're just using your footwork, though?
Rosenstrike is very hesitant. The big thing for Gane is the kicks to all three levels, the athleticism, the stance switches, the boxing that's technical for Gane, who has a nice 13-0 Muay Thai record to go along with the 11-1 in MMA. As good as Gane's kicks are to all three levels, Jon Jones and his kicks, we just talked leg kicks and the volume. Against Reyes, 43 leg kicks. Against Santos, 32. Against Smith, 45. Against Gustafsson in the second fight where he finished him, 18. Against DC in the second fight, 30. Against OSP, 46. Leg kicks are a big thing for Jones to slow down his opponents, to go along with the takedown defense. And if I just take the second fight against Daniel Cormier, Cormier's unsuccessful in all takedown attempts, and he crowds Jon Jones with his boxing and pushes the pace the whole time. He's marching forward.
That's exactly what you're supposed to do.
Locking eyes, doing everything somebody should do to beat Jon Jones. And what does Jones do? Lands a tough shot, lands a head kick, and then wobbles him until he drops him and finishes him. So for Jones, my big red flags, the layoff. I don't know what he's going to look like with the weight at heavyweight. Not a tune-up fight, sure, a title fight against Ciryl friggin' Gane. And Gane has a lot of the answers to beat a guy like Jon Jones. And Jones threw it out there on Twitter. Well, people are saying Gane is the best striker I face. But really, I mean, Thiago Santos had better footwork and he was a better striker.
I think Gustafsson is prime's better than Ciryl Gane. They're different, but his boxing was so
They're
good.
different, and Santos, longer in his MMA career, more
had
miles.
No knees after
the
the
knees
second
got
round.
rocked, and even Santos put on a great performance in that one. And we didn't really see the wrestling as much as we've seen in the past from Jones in that fight and the Reyes fight. So I have a ton of question marks on this one, folks, and I kind of just fighting the internal struggle of trying to make the pick and prediction on this one. The slight favorite is Jon Jones in the matchup. Now, Matt, we threw this one out there on our YouTube community tab. We get you guys to vote on this one. Over 1,000 votes, 62% with Jon Jones in the main event. So we'll go through a few of these comments and make sure we highlight some of the people that are commenting on this one and really interested in this fight, Matt, because it is... Like this is a big time poster fight for sure. So out of the comments, we have Cameron. Initially, when it was announced, I would have said Gane, too many unknowns. But if we're honest, Jones on his day is capable of anything, and anyone's coming back to a straight title, it would be him. One and only, can't wait. MMA GOAT Johnny Bones Jones finally makes a long way to return. And new, we got Jack Lawson, the GOAT doesn't lose to a half French dancer. That one's just rude. And let's go with one more. Kenneth, if Francis can wrestle you and win, Jon Jones will destroy you. We'll see about that one. Obviously, Gane's going to work on that. And Gane, in that interview that he did with Ciryl, I listened to the whole 40 minutes. The weirdest part about the whole training thing was he was like, Nasruddin trains 3 times as hard as I do. Lapalus trains 3 times as hard as I do. But then he'd circle back and he'd say, but this camp, like, we're ready for it. We were getting into it. Training's not an issue. So everybody ran with the headline when it got translated into English. But if you really listen to what he said, there weren't as many red flags at the interview as it was kind of initially thrown out there. Headline on a Reddit.
This is my problem. If Ciryl Gane practiced nothing but his wrestling since that Francis Ngannou fight, that doesn't make up for the lifetime of wrestling that Jon Jones has in his life. And I do think that the physicality of Gane is going to allow him to defend some of those initial takedown attempts. But I just can't get the image of Francis Ngannou all kneed up like Dan Kelly out of my mind of him out wrestling Ciryl Gane. And that might be me putting too much stock into it, but Francis Ngannou had shown no wrestling in the UFC, and when he did fight a pure wrestler in Stipe the first time, showed no ability to really use wrestling get-ups or any wrestling technique. So Francis basically in 3 years was able to learn enough wrestling to go out and win a heavyweight title fight in the UFC. Now, is Francis Ngannou a one-of-one? Is he one of the all-timers? Yes, he is, and I think we do have to give him that respect. And as a side prediction, I would have said Francis would have beat Jon Jones. There you go.
Me
There's
too.
a fun one.
The UFC made a giant mistake.
But with that being said, I do have Jon Jones winning this fight. I worry about how he's going to look up at 265. I keep on wanting to say 205 when I mention Jon Jones, but I do think his overall grappling does get forgotten about quite a bit, because if you look at his last couple of fights, I know Dominic Reyes was able to defend the takedown, but even look back at Dominic Reyes versus Chris Weidman. You bring up the fact that Chris Weidman is somewhat comparable to Bo Nickel with his wrestling. Chris Weidman had one of the deepest entries I've ever seen on Dominic Reyes, and Reyes was able to dig the underhooks and get back up to his feet. I just think Reyes has underrated takedown defense, and that was showcased in the Jones fight. I don't know if Gane's going to be able to do that. I think he'll be able to defend them in round 1, round 2, but I think at a certain point, Jones will be able to get him to the ground. And the thing about Jones, I had mentioned it, was if he gets a takedown, it's not to like win the round. It's to get on top, it's to elbow, it's to go for submission. So for those reasons, I have Jon Jones. But I'm incredibly excited for this fight because I do think Ciryl Gane is one of the few heavyweights who has a speed advantage and has enough of the technique that you look for. Because heavyweight's not a division that we often talk about for technique. And I do think Ciryl Gane has a lot of it. I just keep on going back to the fact that he was out-wrestled by Francis, and Jon Jones is such a good grappler.
But he said J'adore le grappling, so maybe it's a thing. Matt, Fear the Dawn. I know you love this album and you love the main song that's on it. I think he's going to be taking me back, and I think Jon Jones is going to be the one that's taking back the title in the matchup. I mean, for me, Jones, you know the legacy, you know the fights by this point. I mean, Ciryl Gane is one of my favorite fighters to watch. I'll put that out there. It's not the most professional thing to say, but I really enjoy a Ciryl Gane fight because he offers you something that you don't see very often at heavyweight. It's the footwork, it's the speed, it's the variety of shot, and we've seen it in certain matchups, and you might be so down on Dante Mays off his matchup with Augusto Sakai because he didn't really show up for that one. In the fight against Ciryl Gane, he showed aggressiveness. And at the end of the fight, Ciryl Gane was taking it down and landing a heel hook, and that's not something that you see every day in heavyweight MMA. But for me, the well-roundedness of Jon Jones, the wrestling advantage that I perceive he'll have at heavyweight. I don't know if he's going to have it. The striking that I've seen once he cuts that distance, like Tai Tuivasa, with the limited amount of volume he was able to throw. With a glancing right hand, drop Ciryl Gane. Jon Jones can cut angles like that, and Jones strikes very well off the back foot as well, so we'll see how that plays out in this matchup. The kicks are going to be great. The fights are going to be great.
Oh, yeah.
The side kick on Saturday when the main card goes down 2 hours before the prelims. Question mark kicks on this channel. 8-2 last weekend on a wild impromptu card. I mean, Matt, it ended up with a 3-round main event.
Yeah.
With Andre Muniz taking on Brendan Allen. I switched the pick late, and I don't like to cheapen the previews and the predictions throughout the week, but I had a change of heart on Saturday. I switched the pick, and it worked out that time. But Matt, some giant fights on this card. 4 debuts. Ribovics, Radzhabov. You've got Farid Basharat and then Bo Nickel. Some great fights. 11 ranked fighters out of the 28 that are featured on this card. I know we're really amped up for Geoff Neal Rakhmonov, for Gamrot versus Turner.
Derek Brunson, Dricus Duplessis, I can't stop talking about.
There's a lot for pretty well everybody, so I want to thank everyone who tuned in. We lessened the chokes, so we went hard on the analysis this week. But Matt, some really, really big fights coming up this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully we gave them their due and gave them some shine.
285 is going to be a great pay-per-view. This is one of the big ones. Hopefully you guys are excited for it.
Enjoy it. Check us out throughout the week here on the channel with the individual drops. Question mark kicks, the side kick, the likes, and the subs. They've been going up, so we really appreciate it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.